You've probably seen it before, those red, scaly patches on someone's skin. There's a good chance it was psoriasis. It's actually a really common condition, but it's also one of the most misunderstood. So today, we're going to peel back the layers, literally, to understand the complex battle that's happening right beneath the surface. Let's dive in. Okay, first things first, and let's get this out of the way immediately. Psoriasis is absolutely not contagious. You cannot catch it from someone, it's not an infection. This is the single biggest myth out there, and it's the reason for so much of the social and emotional weight that people with psoriasis have to carry. So, what is it exactly? Well, in medical terms, psoriasis is a chronic, which means long-term, skin disease. And right now, there's no cure. It works in cycles, so it can flare up for weeks or months and then calm down for a while. For anyone living with it, this means managing the condition is this constant balancing act against pain, trying to get a good night's sleep, and even just being able to concentrate.
To really get our heads around this, we're going to break it down into 4 parts. First, we'll look at why it's more than skin deep. Then we'll explore the skin's runaway factory to see what's happening on the surface. After that, we'll uncover the real culprit in an immune system betrayal. And finally, we'll see how science is rewriting the battle plan.
All right, let's get into our first section, more than skin deep. Because, while we see psoriasis on the skin, its true impact goes way, way deeper, affecting the entire body. On the surface, the symptoms are incredibly challenging. We're talking about these really well-defined patches of red, inflamed skin that are covered in scales. It can be intensely itchy, really sore, and the skin can get so dry that it actually cracks and bleeds. But the burden, it goes so far beyond the physical. Because the condition is so visible, and because so many people misunderstand it, it creates this profound social and emotional weight. And don't mistake this for a minor inconvenience. This quote, wow, it really puts the severity into perspective. It says that the impact on a person's ability to just function day to day can be just as bad, or sometimes even worse, than what patients with cancer or heart disease experience. Just let that sink in for a second. Now here's where it gets really interesting, where we see just how far beyond the skin this goes. Look at this number, 75%. That's how many psoriasis patients have at least one other related health problem. And this isn't just a coincidence, it's a huge clue pointing to what's really going on. The reason for that is that psoriasis creates a state of chronic body-wide inflammation. Think of it like a low-grade fire that's always burning inside. This systemic inflammation then raises the risk for a whole host of other serious conditions like psoriatic arthritis, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and even other autoimmune diseases like Crohn's. So the key takeaway here is that what you see on the skin is really just a symptom of a much wider inflammatory storm happening inside the body. Okay, so what is actually causing those visible patches on the skin? Let's move on to our second section, the skin's runaway factory, to see what's happening right there on the surface. I want you to think of your skin like a really well-run factory. In healthy skin, new cells are made down deep, they mature, and they travel to the surface over about a month. It's a nice, steady, orderly process. But in psoriasis, that factory goes into complete overdrive. The production line just speeds up like crazy. New cells are being churned out way too fast, and they pile up on the surface before they're even ready, creating that thick, scaly buildup that we see as a psoriasis plaque. So what flips the switch on this runaway factory? Well, for people who are genetically predisposed, a bunch of different things in the environment can act as a trigger. Things like an infection, strep throat is a classic one, or an injury to the skin, like a cut or even a bad sunburn. Certain medications, or even just stress, can be enough to kickstart the disease or cause a really painful flare-up. But that still leaves a pretty big question, right? Why does the skin's factory go haywire in the first place? To get to the real answer, we have to go even deeper. And that brings us to Section 3, an immune system betrayal. For a long time, scientists thought psoriasis was mainly a problem with the skin cells themselves. But it turns out that's not the whole story. At its very core, psoriasis is an immune-mediated disease. It's basically a case of friendly fire. The body's own defense system, the cells that are supposed to fight off germs, get confused and mistakenly attack healthy skin cells instead. And if you look under a microscope, you can see the evidence of this attack plain as day. What we're looking at here is psoriatic skin. You can clearly see that runaway factory at work, see that thick top layer of overgrown skin cells. But now look deeper, in that lower layer. All those little dots, those are inflammatory immune cells that have invaded the skin. They're the ones driving all the chaos. So how does this immune betrayal actually unfold? Well, it happens in a kind of chain reaction, a cascade. First, some kind of trigger, let's say an infection, activates immune cells in the skin. Then special lookout cells called dendritic cells sound the alarm. These alarms activate T cells, which are basically the soldiers of the immune system. These T cells then release a flood of inflammatory chemical messengers called cytokines. And it's these cytokines that give the final mistaken order to the skin cells: multiply and multiply now. And what's incredible is that we've even identified the specific messengers that are stirring up all the trouble. These inflammatory cytokines, with names like TNF-alpha, IL-17, and IL-23, are the fuel that powers this whole vicious cycle of inflammation and out-of-control skin cell growth. Now, try to remember these names because they are the key to everything in our final section.
Understanding this immune cascade has completely changed the game. And that brings us to our final section, rewriting the battle plan.
This right here is the aha moment. Once scientists figured out the exact cytokine messengers that were driving the disease, they could design a counterattack. Modern treatments called biologics are basically engineered to be like smart bombs. They don't just carpet bomb the whole immune system, they precisely target and intercept one of those specific agitators. So a drug called a TNF-alpha inhibitor blocks TNF-alpha. An IL-17 inhibitor blocks IL-17. It is so targeted, so specific, and honestly, it's revolutionary. Shifting the focus from just treating the surface-level symptoms to targeting the root immunological cause, well, it was absolutely pivotal. It's led to this whole new class of super effective therapies that can give many people with severe psoriasis something they might have never thought possible: clear skin and real relief from that systemic inflammation that was driving the whole disease. So when you think about it, psoriasis gives us this fascinating window into the future of medicine. We've gone from just not understanding a disease to decoding its specific molecular language and then designing drugs that can speak that language right back. And that leaves us with a final, pretty big thought. As we get even better at understanding the incredibly complex signals of our own immune system, how is this kind of targeted, personalized medicine going to change the fight against all chronic inflammatory diseases?